Let's see. We'll see if this one works any better. Well, try number 2. Let me know if you can hear me, because it did not work the last time. Okay, much better. Yeah, I just went to pick up a prescription for the first time as a free man in the world. So now I'm walking from UVA to downtown, do some work, and hopefully have a good time. Appreciate y'all joining me on my walk. Trying again not to get run over, because I keep running in front of people, and I keep worrying they're going to run me over, but not yet. Do a kickflip. If I had a skateboard, I still could not do a kickflip. Even when I thought I was a skateboarder, I still couldn't do a kickflip, but I'll figure it out. UK, nice bald. Thank you. I've gotten some nice compliments about my bald head, so I appreciate y'all. God, it's such a nice day to walk. I got a bunch of work done this morning, and then I had to go meet with a guy who had just gotten out of prison, one of my buddies from inside, who had, gone up and down, but I think we're going to do an interview later. Probably tomorrow, which I think is kind of cool. There you go, Slade. Yeah, I can definitely do some parkour, although I'm a little bit heavier. You've lost weight, and I've gained weight, and that's not how it works as much. But what do I get? I don't know. Oh no, I got an antifungal because I have toenail fungus. So that's how hot that is. There are a lot of options, but just the one. Yeah, I like the bald head. Feels good. I was just kind of worried actually about the stereotypes about people getting out. And I didn't want to look like somebody who'd gotten out. I wanted to look like a nutty professor. It seemed better. I'm sorry that your boyfriend was a troll. Well, I'm sorry for you if your boyfriend's a troll. That's unfortunate. Oh, prison industrial complex and the pharmaceutical crossover. That's an interesting one because you actually have insurance inside that limits more medical care than anything because they won't pay for procedures and they'll limit doctors' access. So it's actually really limited HMO type insurance companies that are the problem inside. You also oftentimes have inadequate pay for staff, which leads them to not necessarily be able to hire the people who are going to be able to do the best job. So yeah, it's actually one of those things where people talk about cutting money from it. And I think that there are a lot of people that could be released, but I think having better hiring standards for all staff in correctional facilities, having better training, having better programming would all benefit. Because then it would allow people to actually have a meaningful role. Because oftentimes security is just essentially a babysitter. Their job is to open and close doors, and that doesn't feel very meaningful. It's not going to lead to a positive life. They have one of the lowest life expectancies of any career, have one of the highest rates of drug and alcohol abuse and spousal abuse. It's a really unfortunate thing. Sean wants to hear about the Fifi. You guys don't want to know what Fifi is. Let's not get into that. It's like a device for personal pleasure because of unavailability. But I also want to stay away from people because I'm walking around public and they think I'm crazy talking to a phone. Well, if you think about it, if someone from 20 years ago was doing this, you would really think they were crazy, and now it's just normal to walk down the street and talking to something. It's like Star Trek. Actually, first time I saw somebody using an Apple Watch, it really made me think of Star Trek. Or maybe it was some other sci-fi show, I can't remember. But I've ever worked directly in the prison system? Yeah, theoretically. I just went through orientation for the local jail. It literally, here's the thing, we started trying to get into the juvenile facility 6 months ago. I've been in 3 times, but to actually go through the formal process, I'm just supposed to have orientation on Friday. I went and had a meeting on Thursday at the jail, and I got done with orientation yesterday. That is how quickly they got us in there because they wanted us to be able to do the work. But thank you. It's UVA. Yeah, pretty much everybody's on their phone. I don't know. I'm a little self-conscious about it, of the things that I do and talk about, but you want to talk about the fentanyl meth problem? That's definitely huge. Substance abuse problems are one of the biggest ones we deal with because they're essentially undiagnosed mental health issues. And if we're not providing the support we need, obviously we're not going to be able to address those issues. But thankfully there seems to be a shift in the conversation, and that's really important. We can have a conversation. Just send me a message and we'll talk about it. But yeah, providing meaningful social support before prison or even after prison would make it much less likely that people commit crimes in the first place or that they recidivate. I do not live in Boston. I loved being in Boston, really enjoyed that, but I'm going back in May to speak at the public library, which is cool. But for now, I'm just in Charlottesville, like I said, walking from downtown where UVA where I picked up my prescription to downtown where I'm going to go get some work done. But got to see Slade earlier today, who just got out. Got to ride around a little bit, got to do some meetings. Feel pretty good about it. Yeah. The joyous unicorn. Yes, everybody. After my landlord called me that, which was, I don't know if, I still don't know if it was like passive aggressive, if he was trying to like make a compliment or if he was trying to be insulting, but either way, I was like, you know what? I'll take it. So now I have joyous unicorn merch on my story or on whatever, on my link tree if you're interested. Yeah, I don't often do lives on here. I need to do more. I just make time every day to do lives on different platforms. Kind of hard to, it's hard to like remember to do that and fit it in with everything else going on. There you go, Slade has a fan. Yep. God, doing 15 in a dorm, I hate that. So I did basically 18 years in cells. And like, it wasn't great, but it was like, okay, I can do this. That year, that 10 months in the dormitory, oh my God, that was like by far the worst time I'd ever done. So when I think about people who have to do that for years and years, good luck. I mean, that's a horrible thing. But again, we've managed to get some things done today. You bought the first badge. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Liz. I didn't even know you could buy a badge. I don't know what that is. But it tells me to thank you, so thank you. Yeah, we're really trying to talk about those issues. We had a big, I spoke to a group in Canada today, the John Howard Society, that works doing prison reentry in Canada, which I think is important because we think of this as a uniquely American problem, but unfortunately it's a problem all over the world. And oftentimes other systems are facing similar problems that we have. Because we'll focus on the systems that do things right, like Norway or Finland. We won't necessarily recognize that we have the same challenges in Canada or in Mexico or in different places. So yeah, I think it's always important to do that. Upper Peninsula of Michigan is a mess. Unfortunately, there's so many places around the country right now that are a mess. Again, undiagnosed mental health crises, issues with poverty, issues with addiction. You know, when we don't have basic social safety nets or basic social standards, when kids get expelled from school for bad behavior, rather than getting training and counseling and the things they need to basically act better or have better behavior or heal trauma, and then they're out in the street and they have nothing to do. They can't get a job because they're too young. There are no recreation programs, so they're out getting in trouble or out breaking windows or out doing whatever, kids and teenagers do, and then they end up in the juvenile system and tend to do really well within that structure because they have people that care about them if they're lucky. Not all systems are like that, but when we have locally, they have people that care. They have a structure. They have things to do. They do really well, and then they get out and they go back to not having structure. They go back to being in a place where they have nothing to do. Their families can't afford to put them in expensive sports programs. They can't go to extracurricular activities. We've basically taken all the things away that gives kids that don't have money a meaningful opportunity to engage in their community. And it's great if you have money, but if you don't, it's not going to work very well. The only person I know who's in Michigan, and I think he's moving, is Ray. I'm supposed to see him in June, so we'll see how that goes. Texas as well, I always hear that. Let me see. I always got to look to see if people are behind me because I always feel weird, like, walking and talking, especially since I have people that have stopped me on this street to be like, are you the guy from Instagram? And I'm like, yeah, that's me. Which is weird. Hey, Amanda, I saw your video. We got to talk about what happened and what that means. Chat about that later. But yeah, it's my favorite thing about being downtown, and that was the reason I wanted to live in town, because I wanted to be able to walk places. Because, getting my car and driving 30 minutes into town every morning, it's wasting gas, it's wasting time. Because if I'm doing this, even if it's not a run or not like a heavy exercise thing, I feel better. I feel like I'm doing something, and I can walk down to the co-working space. I can walk to meetings. I can walk to wherever I'm going. Yeah, I really enjoy it. Hello, Heather. I don't have a other shredder on, but I got this sweatshirt on. Really glad to hear. I mean, one of the big things I wanted to talk about was the process or the experience of incarceration for those who have loved ones who are locked up. Because I think it's really important to understand, to be able to empathize to some degree, be able to understand the challenges upon release. Because if we don't talk about it, people don't know what to expect. And God, so often the guys on the inside would have these really unrealistic ideas. And I spent years trying to plan and read and study and go to therapy. And I still had an unrealistic idea. So when people are like, man, I'm just going to go out and start my business. Okay, that's great. With what capital? How are you going to get a loan? How are you going to get the materials you need? Do you know about the licensing required? Do you know, all the things that are important. In which ways do you feel imperialism, capitalism, colonialism play a role in criminality and the profit motive? All right, that's a really big question. So if we look at the history, God, I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer that, honestly, because that's a very academic question. But I do believe that, for example, if we look at the way a lot of these laws are done, we're dealing with essentially a new Jim Crow, as was argued. Or at least that was the origin of many of the laws that we're dealing with today. First, colonialism. Again, I'm not sure I'm the person to answer this. I would say we've brought distinctly European values to a lot of the things we do, and that those values are, in many cases, inherently racist. Not necessarily in all cases. And I do believe that there is kind of growth and movement in that direction. But if you look at the history of redlining in our country, you look at the history of like enforced generational poverty, we've essentially created a system where poverty is criminalized to a certain degree, or impoverished neighborhoods aren't provided with the same services or opportunities as other neighborhoods. Just looking at school funding is a great example of that. In that kids that come from wealthy families literally go to better schools than kids come from poor families. And then again, with the lack of resources and lack of investment in mental health, the lack of investment in counselors, we essentially have a school system that, churns out people like factories. There's a great documentary about that, I can't remember. It basically said that poor school systems are really well designed to train workers for rich people who go to different school systems and teach them to be wealthy or run businesses, or that wasn't exactly what it was, but it was a good gist. Feels like when you leave school, not necessarily prepared to lead a regular adult life. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I've argued for social emotional learning. To me, is more important than algebra. I mean, I think that academics have a really important role, but academics play a very small role in our lives, whereas social emotional learning, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, these things play a much bigger role because they apply to everything we do. We can use them at home, we can use them at work, we can use them in social settings, we use them everywhere. And by not focusing on them, we prioritize academic education, which ultimately has very little direct value in many cases. Now, we need to learn to read, we need to learn to write, we need to learn to think, we need to learn to construct sentences and analyze, but what we've often done is train people to memorize things rather than teaching them to think, which I think is tremendously bad. I like your double negative there, Amanda. Algebra was not great. So I've thought about writing a book. I even had a whole book proposal that I sent off, and they wanted to use a ghostwriter, and at the time I was like, there's no way, I'm not going to do a ghostwriter, like, kiss my ass. And then now I don't have any time, so it would almost make more sense. But I have the speech that I'm doing for South by Southwest looks like it's something that I could turn into a book as I've kind of put it all together. So maybe that'll be the next draft. I just don't have time. That's the problem. That's why I almost wish I had a ghostwriter. But yeah, I would really like to. I actually have a couple different books I would like to write, a couple different things I'd like to do, so I just need to get them together. Access to public outdoor park space. So I remember it was some study, I think it was from the 80s or 90s, so it may not be directly relevant today, but it essentially said having a pool in a neighborhood reduced the number of people who went to prison statistically. So literally just having access to some kind of outdoor facility. So pools, I would then assume, yes, parks, play equipment, and again, really sports leagues and community events, which are what's really lacking because everybody's looking for a sense of community, and when we fail to find it in legitimate places, we tend to find it in illegitimate ones. One of the reasons we have such a big gang problem, especially in prisons, because people don't have necessarily family units, they don't have a sense of community. By not having that, they find that elsewhere, and that elsewhere is not always a good place. The podcast is definitely a possibility. People keep bringing it up. For the longest time, I didn't really know what that would entail, and I had an experience where my girlfriend at the time spent years and tens of thousands of dollars on a podcast and really never was able to recoup that cost. So it's not even about making money, it's just about being able to do it in a way that doesn't cost money. And again, having time, because as somebody said the other day at the nonprofit board meeting, the major capital involved is time, because there are only so many things that I can do. And I'm trying to actually make more time for myself because I've prioritized to an unhealthy degree all the other things that I'm doing, and that has tended to lead to burnout. So yeah, the podcast would be good. It's definitely a possibility, and I'll definitely look at, especially at South by Southwest, where I'm hoping I can make some connections. I know I'm going to LA in June for another Prison Talk event, and there are a couple podcasts out there that have asked me if I could jump on that. Again, we'll have to see, because I think I'm hoping South by Southwest might win some doors, because if I could get a production company or one of these groups to invest in it, make it possible in a different way. I gotta tie my shoe. That would again make it easier or more possible, or however you want to say. It would make it less stressful, because Cosmarte, who runs Conbody and does some really good work in New York. He has a whole production company. He literally just shows up, does a podcast, and leaves. He's got producers. He's got people who schedule everybody. He does that. Like, the idea of adding all the logistics onto what I'm doing right now just does not seem very doable or feasible. But who knows? People say you can rest when you're dead. I'm just going to try to rest some now. You know, it was kind of a rough weekend with my grandpa. And getting back, I didn't necessarily get a lot of sleep. And I'm booked up basically all week because I have to get everything done. I have to get all the presentations ready. I have to do all these meetings. I have to formulate some more stuff because I go to South by Southwest on Friday. And so I jump on a plane, and then that'll be pretty much nonstop. We've got a bunch of meetings set up. There are a bunch of networking events I want to go to. There are a bunch of groups that do stuff around housing and work for returning citizens. And so I want to be able to network those people, you know, drive some attention toward the nonprofit, as well as get some educational things for the nonprofit. Because there are people out there doing work probably better than we are, know things that we don't know. And the more we can learn from them, the more it'll, you know, benefit the cause. So hopefully that'll be a good networking event. Of course, the actual speaking event, which is going to be great. Yeah, so we'll just have to see how it goes. But let's see, can we get in front of people here? Dealing with traffic in the city and talking on the phone is probably not the smartest thing, but you know, we all gotta live dangerously sometimes, right? Traffic. Oh, run! Don't get run over. Run! Yeah. So that's me. I'm basically a 7-year-old with a phone. So, how are y'all doing today? As I ramble on about any and everything. And as these people are apparently stuck and doing something wrong. I don't know. Traffic's always fun to me. So I'm kind of glad I can be out of the car as often as I could. Yeah, I'm a little worried about them hitting me. That's why I backed out. Uh-oh, now they're like backing out this way. I will just let that be. But walking by the old Omni Hotel. When I was a kid, my parents used to go to this weird non-denominational church that wasn't even really religious. It was just more of a community organization, which I thought was great. So I remember coming here for that and always thinking like that was the coolest place to go, that the people who could like come here, they were, you know, really fortunate. They could come like stay in a hotel room because that meant they were like doing well in life. Maybe one day. The prisons try to create communities. So some do and some don't. When you talk about like tournaments and sports leagues and things, it really depends on who the rec supervisor is. Some places you get a good one or you get good rec workers. Man, you have all that kind of stuff. Like we had boxing when I first went in. We had sports leagues. We had everything. Other times you get somebody who just doesn't care and doesn't want to do their job. And then, yeah, there really is no community. Now, not all of those situations are ideal. Sometimes they create competition in a way that isn't the healthiest or isn't the most productive. But, yeah, and a lot of times it's really done internally. Like when I was talking to the group in Canada this morning, my experience was that the majority of the learning and the encouragement and the support I got in prison was from other incarcerated people. It wasn't from the staff and it wasn't from the programming. It was from people who had been there for 20 years or 30 years. Were like, hey, you know, this is my story. This is what I went through. This is how I learned, and this is what I'm doing better. So I got that kind of training and encouragement and support from them more than anything. Anything you can do to help further prison reform? I mean, I would say you can talk about it. You can talk about restorative justice. You can talk about alternative programming. You can support organizations that do good work. Most of those are local. Like there are a couple national ones, like CEO Works is an amazing one. They're a nonprofit that connects people with jobs after employment, but they only work in certain geographic areas because of limited funding. Resilience Education does mentoring and training inside. Fountain Fund does small loans, people getting out of prison. There are a lot of really cool organizations. As far as what I'm doing at South by Southwest, I'm giving a talk on adversity as an incubator and how hardship and struggle is the best teacher we could ever have, sharing from my experience and relating to everything from business startup to building a family. I am a stand-up fan. Did I burn any bridges that I wish I could rebuild? I don't think so. People from back when I committed my crimes were really understanding. I mean, people supported me and believed in me even when I didn't deserve it, when I had shown them no reason to. And since, I mean, there's some people that I'm not friends with today that I kind of wish I could be, but what I found is one of the most important things to do for health is actually cut people out of my life. Because I've got so many people in my life, I have to be selective about where I spend my time. And there are people that I love, but that I have to love at a distance because the way they're living isn't really consistent with my values or isn't necessarily the healthiest or most positive, but I don't know. It's definitely something I struggle with. You know, how to be a friend to everybody that I can, still show up for myself and then not neglect others. I think it's a process. But we all do what we can. I would, yeah. I don't know when I will ever come to Indianapolis, but if I do, I will definitely let you know. I'd love to go see a show. I need to see more comedy. I was watching it at night with Courtney, because I really have trouble watching TV shows and movies, but yeah, I would definitely watch stand-up comedy. I'd love to go to some events. I need to start just doing that. I went to see Whitney Cummings here in Charlottesville when she was on, but I've gotten to Common House, so I gotta go. Thank you for joining me for as long as you did. Bye.